Let's go, baby! I started the video this time in landscape, so we'll be all good. I did this. Would you believe it's a self-trim? But you are, I have to admit, you're looking at the best bits. It's not the best on the back. But we move! We move! Okay. Part 3. Easy peasy. How to quit pornography. Very good. Chapter 5, brainwashing. This is the second reason we start using. Understanding this brainwashing fully required us to first examine the powerful effects of supernormal stimulus. Our brains simply aren't prepared for the creation of an online harem, allowing us to flick between more potential mates in 15 minutes than our ancestors had in several lifetimes. There's been much misguided advice in the past. One example being that masturbation leads to blindness. I'm blind, Deck. This, along with other scare tactics, clearly overdid it. Misconceptions such as these were right to be overthrown by science, but the baby has been thrown out with the bathwater. From our earliest years, our subconscious minds are bombarded with sexual messages and imagery, magazines and advertisements loaded with innuendo. Some pop videos are extremely suggestive. Oh, they've got worse. They've really got worse. But don't despair. Make it a game to identify what components they're using. Is it shock value, novelty, colour, size, taboo, nostalgia, etc.? Such a game can even be taught to preteens as a way to educate them. I do use that one, and I do think it's really important. It's just keeping that self-awareness, keeping that groundedness, and just like looking at it again objectively and being like, look at what they're doing. Because, for example, when you are thinking with your doot, 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 you're not, you're like, anyone that has done CBT will understand that it's about when we're like deep in our emotions, and lust is a powerful emotion, we are like in this square. And CBT is about kind of coming back out the square, looking at the square, and seeing it for what it is. Right. At its core, the message is the most precious thing on this earth. My last thought in action will be orgasm. Is this exaggeration? Watch any TV or movie plot, and you'll see the mix up of the sensory, touch, smell, voice, and the propagative, orgasmic parts of sex. The impact of this doesn't register on our conscious, but the subconscious has time to absorb it. Can you please stop moving? Very good. 5.1 Scientific reasoning. There's publicity the other way. Sexual dysfunction scares, loss of motivation, preferring virtual porn to real girls, yourbrainonporn.com, and various internet subcultures. But these movements don't actually stop people from using. Logically speaking, they should, but the simple fact is they don't. Even the health risks listed from peer-reviewed studies on yourbrainonporn.com aren't enough to stop an adolescent from starting. Ironically, the most powerful force in this confusion is the user themselves. It's a fallacy that users are weak-willed or physically weak people. You have to be physically strong in order to cope with an addiction after you know it exists. Perhaps the most painful aspect is that they place themselves as unsuccessful losers and insufferable introverts. It's likely that a friend could be more interesting in person if they hadn't put themselves down for seeking self-pleasure. And this again might be flipped, but there is a picture here. I'm seeing that flip, so it doesn't really make much sense, unfortunately. But it's basically showing the short cycle, the trap, which is brainwashing. Go on, you deserve it. Everyone does it. It's natural. You only get one life. You love it. Which leads to PMO, porn, masturbation, orgasm. You did it again, you freaking idiot. You have no self-control. Leads to a dopamine drop. Leads to the beast saying, feed me more. Ooh, daddy. Fucking hell. You can tell when I've got a free house, innit? Urge to PMO. You know how this goes. Just get on with it. You can stop after this last one. Let's all be honest, that is true to the T. Chapter 5.2 Problems using willpower. Users quitting using the willpower method. They blame their lack of willpower and ruin their peace and happiness. It's one thing to fail in self-discipline and another to self-loathe. Excuse me. After all, there's no law that requires you to be hard all the time before sex. Properly aroused and able to satisfy your partner. We're working on an addiction, not a habit, and at no point do you argue with yourself to stop a habit like golfing. But to do the same with porn addiction is normalised. Why? Constant exposure to a supernormal stimulus rewires your brain. So building a resistance to this brainwashing is critical, as if buying a car from a second-hand car dealer, nodding politely, but not believing a word the man is saying. So don't believe that you must have as much sex as you can, all of it being exceptionally good using porn in its absence. Don't play the safe porn game either. Your little monster invented that game to lure you in. Is amateur porn certified by some authority? Porn sites gather data from their users and use it to cater to their needs. And if they see an uptick in a certain category, they'll focus on it and get content out ASAP. Don't be fooled by educational intent or safe female marketed clips. Start asking yourself, why am I doing it? Do I really need to? No, of course you don't, you big silly willy. Most users swear that they only watch static and soft porn and therefore are fine, when in actuality they're straining at the leash, fighting with their willpower to resist temptations. If done too often and for too long, this depletes their willpower considerably and they begin failing in other life projects where willpower is of great value, such as exercise, dieting, etc. Failure in these areas makes them feel miserable and guilty, cascading into using pornography again. If this isn't done, they'll vent their anger and depression onto loved ones. Once you become addicted to internet porn, the brainwashing is increased. Your subconscious knows the little monster has to be fed, blocking everything else. It's fear that keeps people from quitting, fear of that empty, insecure feeling they get when they stop flooding their brains with dopamine. Just because you're unaware of it doesn't mean it's not there. You don't have to understand it any more than a cat needs to understand where the hot water pipes are. The cat just knows that if it sits in a certain spot, it feels warm. 5.3 Passivity. The passivity of our minds and dependence on authority leading to brainwashing is the primary difficulty of giving up porn. Our upbringing in society, reinforced by the brainwashing of our own addiction, and combined with the most powerful friends, relatives, and colleagues. The phrase giving up is a classic example of the brainwashing, implying a genuine sacrifice. The beautiful truth is there's nothing to give up. On the contrary, you'll be freeing yourself from a terrible disease and achieving marvellous positive gains. We'll begin removing this brainwashing now, starting with no longer referring to giving up, but to stopping, quitting, or perhaps the truest position, escaping. Very important vocabulary for the brain. The only thing that persuades us to use initially is other people doing it and feeling that we're missing out. We work hard to become hooked, yet we never find what they've been missing. Every time we see another clip, it reassures us there must be something in it, otherwise people wouldn't be doing it and the business wouldn't be so big. Even when they kick the habit, the ex-user feels they're being deprived when a discussion on a sexy entertainer, singer, or even a porn star comes up during parties or social functions. They must be good if all my friends talk about them, right? Do they have 3 pictures online? They feel safe. They'll just have one peek tonight, and before they know it, they're hooked again. The brainwashing is extremely powerful, and you need to be aware of its effects. Technology continues to grow, and the future will bring exponentially faster sites and access methods. The porn industry is investing millions into virtual reality so that it will become the next best thing. We don't know where we're going, unequipped to deal with present technology as it is, or what is to come. We're about to remove this brainwashing. It isn't the non-user who's being deprived, but the user who is forfeiting a lifetime of health, energy, wealth, peace of mind, confidence, courage, self-respect, happiness, and freedom. What do they gain from these considerable sacrifices? Absolutely nothing, apart from the illusion of trying to get back to the state of peace, tranquility, and confidence that the non-user always enjoys. Chapter 5.4, Withdrawal Pangs. As explained earlier, users believe they use porn for enjoyment, relaxation, or some sort of education. And I just want to put in, now that I'm over a month free, I can absolutely say just none of that is true. And the only thing is the high shock stimulation, because you will see things that you probably wouldn't otherwise see in real life. But that doesn't mean you need to see it. Very good. The actual reason is relief of withdrawal pangs. Our subconscious mind begins to learn that internet porn and masturbation at certain times tends to be pleasurable. As we become increasingly hooked on the drug, the greater the need to relieve the withdrawal pangs becomes, and the further the subtle trap drags you down. This process happens so slowly that you aren't even aware of it. Most young users don't realise they're addicted until attempting to stop, and even then, many won't admit it. Take this conversation a therapist had with hundreds of teenagers. Therapist. Excuse me, got a little burpy. Pardon. Therapist. You realise that internet porn is a drug, and the only reason why you're using it is that you can't stop. Patient. Nonsense. I enjoy it. If I didn't, I would stop. Therapist. Just stop for a week to prove to me that you can if you want to. No need. I enjoy it. If I wanted to, I would. Just stop for a week to prove to yourself you aren't hooked. What's the point? I enjoy it. As already stated, users tend to relieve their withdrawal pangs at times of stress, boredom, concentration, or combinations of these. In the following chapters, we'll target these aspects of the brainwashing. For me, it was definitely overwhelm, stress. It was just a crutch in that aspect. And then I'm still working to get better at emotional regulating. Chapter 6, Brainwashing Aspects. The porn trap's big monster is bred through the culmination of many aspects, including societal forces, media portrayals, peers, and the user's own internal narrative. Failure to deconstruct these fallacies whilst using the willpower method eventually leads to feelings of deprivation, leading the user back into the trap. Deconstruction of the imagined value of porn is crucial for success and allows you to see where you're being robbed. Imagined value of porn. I like that. Of importance to note is the link between brainwashing and fear. It's fear of feeling future withdrawal pangs that creates the pangs. Fear is the pang itself. Think about when you've had withdrawal symptoms such as sweaty palms, shortness of breath, sleeping problems, and an inability to think straight. Now think of similar situations when you've had those feelings. Job interviews, nerves around an attractive person, public speaking, etc. These are the same anxious feelings fear causes. Simply put, how can a physical drug still hook people months after stopping? It must be mentally, correct? 6.1. Stress. Not only great tragedies in life, but also minor stresses drives users into the forbidden, unsafe area previously excluded. Stresses include socializing, phone calls, anxieties of the housewife with young children, and many others. Let's take phone calls as an example, particularly for a business person. Most calls aren't from satisfied customers or your boss congratulating you. There's some sort of aggravation. Coming home to mundane family life of kids screaming and their partner's emotional demands causes the user, if they aren't already doing so, to fantasize the relief of porn promised that night. They unconsciously suffer withdrawal pangs. These stressors weakened and unprepared for additional aggravation, partially relieving the pangs at the same time as normal stress. The total is reduced and the user gets a temporary boost. The boost isn't an illusion, However, the user does genuinely feel better than before, but they're more tense than they would be as a non-user. Very true. The following example isn't designed to shock you. Easy peasy promises no such treatment, but is to emphasize that porn destroys your nerves rather than relaxing them. Like, I'm gonna say it's like coffee or caffeine, but again, that's a conversation for another time. Try to imagine getting to the stage where you're unable to be aroused, even with a very sexy and attractive partner. For a moment, pause and try to visualize life where a very lovely and charming person has to compete and fail with the virtual porn stars occupying your harem to get your attention. Imagine the frame of mind of a person who, when issued with that warning, continues using and dies without ever having real sex with this charming and willing partner. It's easy to dismiss these people as weirdos, but stories like these aren't fakes. This is what the awful novelty of the porn drug does to your brain. The more you go through life, the more courage is sapped, and the more you're deluded into believing porn is doing the opposite. Okay, I don't want to lose where I am, so let me just highlight and bookmark. I do just want to add, anecdotally, this happened to me, only ones that I can really remember. She was absolute 10 out of 10. Like, she was just absolute, perfect doesn't exist, but she was as close to it as you can. She had a very sexy name, everything. It's the name of my favourite women's wrestler, who, also fancy. Absolutely unreal, really into me, completely down. And I struggled with erectile dysfunction for the first time ever. And it was just, it was wild. At my old age, and I mean that ironically, my young age, and I had ED over a 10 out of 10. It's crazy. That is porn. I'm not saying it's just porn, but the idea is that if we're using porn to emotionally regulate, we're not working on other issues. So it's just a whole thing, man. Okay. Have you ever been overtaken by panic when out of the blue the Wi-Fi stops working or is too slow? Non-users don't suffer from it, as internet porn causes that feeling. As you go through life, it systematically destroys your nerve and courage, leaving delta phos B to form powerful neural water slides in its wake, progressively destroying your ability to say no. By the stage where virility has been killed, the user believes porn is their new partner and is unable to face life without it. Internet porn isn't relieving your nerves, it's slowly destroying them. One of the great gains of breaking the addiction is the return of your natural confidence and self-assurance. Now, this is true, but I also get a massive bonus from semen retention. Something I will talk about in another video. I don't think I've done that yet. But yeah, it's not as important as quitting porn. Quitting porn is the number one thing because that's actually a drug. Masturbation on its own, I would say, is kind of innocent, but it's more the fact. So it's not like I'm shunning that, but it's just the fact if you can get control over, you can get sexual discipline through semen retention. If you can control that, you can control anything. So it does come with a lot of psychological and physical benefits. Okay, there's no need to rate yourself on your ability to satisfy a partner. This isn't freedom. But this, I suppose also that's people pleasing. But this freedom cannot be obtained by continuing to grease the dopamine water slide in ways that undercut your happiness and libido by repeating the same destructive behavior. Chapter 6.2, Boredom. If you're like many people, as soon as you climb into bed, you're already on your favourite porn site, probably already forgetting until reminded. It's become second nature. Similarly, porn relieving boredom is another fallacy because boredom is a frame of mind, occurring when you've been deprived for a long time or are trying to cut down. The actual situation is this. When you're addicted to the supernormal pull of internet porn, and then try to abstain, it feels like there's something missing. If you have something to occupy your mind that isn't stressful, you can go for long periods of time without being bothered by the absence of the drug. However, when you're bored, there's nothing to take your mind off it, so you feed the monster. When you're indulging yourself and not trying to stop or cut down, even firing up private browsing becomes subconscious. This ritual is automatic. If the user tries to remember sessions during the last week, they're only able to remember a small proportion of them, like the very last one or the last session after a long abstinence. The truth being that porn increases boredom indirectly because orgasms make you feel lethargic, and instead of undertaking an energetic activity, users tend to prefer lounging around, bored, and relieving their withdrawal pangs. Countering the brainwashing is important because users tend to view porn when bored. Our brains wired to interpret porn as interesting. Similarly, we've also been brainwashed into believing sex, even bad sex, helps relaxation. It's a fact that when sad or under stress, couples want to have sex. In the absence of discrimination between tantric and propagative sex, watch how quickly you want to get away from each other after the mandatory orgasm is achieved. If the couple had just decided to hug, speak or cuddle and go to sleep, they'd have felt relieved. 6.3. Concentration. Masturbation and sex don't help concentration. When you're trying to concentrate, you automatically try and avoid distractions. Therefore, when a user wants to concentrate, they don't even think, automatically opening the browser, feeding the little monster, and partially ending the craving. They get on with the matter at hand, already forgetting that they've viewed porn. After years of dopamine flooding, the neurological changes affect abilities such as accessing information, planning, and impulse control. You're also driven to provide novelty for the next session, as the same stuff no longer generates enough dopamine and opioids. So you'll have to roam the internet streets for novelty, fighting the pull to cross the line towards shocking material, which in turn generates more stress and leaves you unfulfilled after finishing. Concentration is also adversely affected as the dopamine receptors are cooled due to natural tolerance to the large surges, reducing the benefit of smaller dopamine boosts from natural de-stressors. Your concentration and inspiration will be greatly boosted as this process is reduced. For many, it's the concentration aspect that prevents them from succeeding with the willpower method. They could put up with the irritability and bad temper, but the failure to concentrate on something difficult, once their crutch is removed, ruins many. Loss of concentration that users suffer when trying to escape isn't due to the absence of sex, let alone porn. You have mental blocks when you're addicted to something, or when you have a mental block, what do? You fire up the browser, which doesn't cure the block, so then what do? You do what you have to do, getting on with it just as non-users do. When you're a user, nothing is blamed on the cause. Users never have a sexual dysfunction, just occasional downtime. The moment you stop using, everything that goes wrong is blamed on the reason you stopped. Now, when you have a mental block, instead of just getting on with it, you begin to say, if only I could check my harem now, it would solve all my problems. You then begin to question your decision to quit and escape from the slavery. If you believe that porn is a genuine aid to concentration, worrying about it will guarantee that you'll be unable to concentrate. Doubt, not the physical withdrawal pangs, creates the problem. Always remember it's the user who suffers pangs, not non-users. 6.4. Relaxation. Most users think that porn helps them to relax. It doesn't. Frantic search to get the fix in those dark alleys of the internet, and the internal struggle of straining at the leash to cross the red line certainly doesn't sound like a very relaxing activity. As night rolls in after a trip to a new place or a long day, we sit down to relax, relieving our hunger, thirst, and are completely satisfied. The user is not, as they have another hunger to satisfy. Users think of porn as the icing on the cake, but in actuality it's the little monster that needs feeding. The truth is that the addict can never be completely relaxed, and going through life it gets exponentially worse. Take one online comment from an ex-user. I really believed that I had an evil demon in my makeup. I now know that I had. However, it wasn't some inherent flaw in my character, but the little internet porn monster that was creating the problem. During those times, I thought I had all the problems in the world. But when I look back on my life, I wonder where all the great stress was. In everything else in my life, I was in control. Only thing controlling me was porn slavery. The sad thing is that even today, I can't convince my children that it was the slavery that caused me to be so irritable. Every time I hear porn addicts trying to justify their addiction, the message is, oh, it helps me to relax. Take the online account of a single dad whose 6-year-old son wanted to share his bed in the night after a scary movie, but the dad would refuse so that he could have his session and edge for hours. Here's another smoking analogy. A couple of years ago, adoption authorities threatened to prevent smokers from adopting children. A man rang up irate. "You're completely wrong," he said. "I can remember when I was a child. If I had a contentious matter to raise with my mother, I would wait until she lit a cigarette, because she was more relaxed then. Why couldn't the man talk to his mother when she wasn't smoking a cigarette? Why are some users so stressed when they're not getting their fix, even after real sex? One story online details a man working in the advertising field having nines and tens open for dates at any time. But lost interest in taking them out for dinner as internet porn was far easier, involved no restaurant spending, and had no possibility of a no from his date at the end of an evening. Why be bothered when this little monster keeps him craving the low risk, high reward scheme at his fingertips upon reaching home? Why are non users completely relaxed then? Why are users not able to relax without a fix for a day or two? Read about the experience of a user taking the abstinence oath and quitting, and you'll notice the struggle with temptations. Clearly not relaxed at all when no longer allowed to have the only pleasure they are entitled to. They've forgotten what it's like to be completely relaxed. Porn can be likened to a fly being caught in a pitcher plant. To begin with, the fly is eating the nectar, but at some imperceptible stage, the plant begins to eat the fly. Isn't it timed you climbed out of the plant? 6.5. Energy. Oh, I quite like that lighting. Most users are aware of the progressive effects porn's novelty and escalation seeking has on their brain's reward and sexual systems. However, they aren't aware of the effect it has on their energy level. One of the porn trap's subtleties is that the effects it has upon us, both physically and mentally, happen so gradually and imperceptibly that we remain unaware of them and instead regard withdrawal as normal. So true, man. The effect is similar to that of bad eating habits. We look at people who are grossly overweight and wonder how they could have possibly allowed themselves to reach that state. But suppose that it happened overnight. You went to bed trim, rippling with muscles, and not an ounce of body fat on your body, and awoke to find yourself fat, bloated, and pot-bellied. Instead of waking up and feeling rested and full of energy, you feel miserable, lethargic, and barely able to open your eyes. You'd be panic-stricken, wondering what awful disease you had contracted overnight, and yet this disease is exactly the same. The fact it took you 20 years to arrive there is irrelevant. Porn is the same. If it were possible to immediately transfer your mind and body to give you a direct comparison to how you'd feel having stopped porn for just 3 weeks, that's all that would be required to convince you. You'd ask yourself, would it really feel this good? Or what that really amounts to, had I really sunk that low? You wouldn't just feel healthier, with more energy, but sporting far more confidence and a heightened ability to concentrate. Much higher self-esteem, much higher self-respect, way less shame, guilt, and therefore easier to socialise with people, look people in the eye. A lot more pride. Lack of energy, tiredness, and everything related to it is nicely swept under the rug of getting older. Friends and colleagues who also live sedentary lifestyles further compound the normalization of this behavior. The belief that energy is the exclusive prerogative of children and teenagers and that old age begins in your 20s is another symptom of the brainwashing. Like I said, I shouldn't have had erectile dysfunction when I was like 26, 27. That is insane. That is like peak dick strength time. As is being unaware of eating and exercise habits as a result of the compounding effects of dopamine desensitization. Shortly after stopping porn, the foggy and muggy feeling will leave you. The point being, with porn, you're always debiting your energy and, in that process, tampering with the chemistry of your limbic system. Unlike quitting smoking, where the return of your physical and mental health is only gradual, quitting porn gives you excellent results from day one. Killing the little monster and closing the water slides takes a little bit of time, but recovering your reward system is nothing like the slow slide into the pit. If you're going through the trauma of the willpower method, any health or energy gains will be obliterated by the depression you'll be going through. Unfortunately, it's not possible for Easy Peasy to immediately transfer you into your mind in 3 weeks' time, but you can. You know instinctively that what you're being told is correct. All you need to do is use your imagination. Okay, chapter 6.6, social night sessions. This is misinformation that seems to make sense, but doesn't. In order to control your appetite, will you eat at home before leaving to go to a restaurant or party? This is what you're doing with sessions before social nights, looking tired and not up to your best. The widespread adoption of pickup techniques has introduced pressure to perform, pick up, and score. Attempting to drown your butterflies with porn and substances will only make the problem worse in the long run. Personally, I like a little bit of anxiety to keep me focused and engaged, and tiring yourself out mentally and physically with orgasm isn't going to help. Social night porn, occasioned by two or more of our usual reasons for pleasure/prop seeking, social functions at their core being both stressful and relaxing. This might appear to be a contradiction, but any form of socialization can be stressful, even with friends, wanting to be yourself and completely relaxed. There's many occasions that have multiple factors present at any one time. Take driving as an example, since after all your life is at stake. Stressful with concentration required for sustained periods of time, you need not be aware of these factors, your subconscious already receiving the message. By the same token, when finding yourself stuck in traffic jams or bored on long highway drives, the promise of a session upon reaching home occupies your mind. Another good example is going on a first date, your mind throwing out questions about the person you're about to meet. Then, if your enthusiasm starts to fade upon meeting the person in the flesh, you'll start to feel too relaxed, then guilty for feeling this way. The tug of war has started. I want sex or get me out of here ASAP, priming you for post-date porn. Even if the date went well, and hours later you're back at their place, no matter which way it goes, you won't be satisfied if your only goal is seeking orgasm. At other times you drive home alone, your only thought being your online harem instead of congratulating yourself for your efforts. You can bet that someone in this position will have a session upon reaching home, and it's often after nights like these, waking to feel uneasy emptiness, are the ones where we'll miss the most when we contemplate stopping porn. We think that life will never be quite as enjoyable again. In fact, it's the same principle at work. The sessions simply provide relief from the withdrawal pangs. At some times having greater needs than others, greasing the water slide for the next cue. Make this clear, it's not internet porn and harem dwellers that's special, it's the occasion. Once the need for porn is removed, such occasions will become more enjoyable and stressful situations less stressful. And there's another little bit of illustration here, just showing the easy peasy way out. So no brainwashing equals freedom. No PMO, no dopamine drops, no urge to PMO, no brainwashing, freedom. Beautiful. Chapter 7. What am I giving up? Absolutely nothing. Porn is difficult to give up because of the fear we're being deprived of our pleasure or prop. The fear that certain pleasant situations will never be quite the same again. Fear you'll be left unable to cope with stressful situations. In other words, it's the effects of brainwashing deluding us into believing that sex, and by extension orgasm, is a must for all human beings. Even further, it's the belief there's something inherent in internet porn that we need, and that when we stop using, we will be denying ourselves and creating a void. Make this clear in your mind, porn doesn't fill a void, it creates one. Our bodies are the most sophisticated objects on the planet. Whether you believe in intelligent design, natural selection, or a combination of both, our bodies are thousands of times more effective than man. We're unable to create the smallest living cell or the miracles of eyesight, reproduction, and various intellect systems present in our bodies or brains. If this creator or process had intended us to handle supernormal stimulus, we'd have been provided with different reward systems. Our bodies are provided with fail-safe warning devices, and we ignore these at our peril. 7.1. There's nothing to give up. Once you purge the little monster from your body and the brainwashing, the big monster from your mind, you'll neither want to masturbate often nor use internet porn from it. There are many knowns and unknowns when it comes to porn addiction, with many in the medical community having no concept of questioning or determining someone as a porn addict. A lot of reported systems are wrongly tagged under other causes. It's not that users are generally stupid people, it's just that they're miserable without porn. Caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, which I believe is the same as a rock and a hard place, abstaining and being miserable because they cannot use porn, or miserable because they're guilty and begin despising themselves because of it. The benefit of quitting properly is you lose both of them. When they get symptoms such as low back pain or sexual dysfunction, their minds are torn between accepting responsibility and looking the other way. Another smoker analogy. All of us have seen smokers who develop excuses to sneak off for a crafty puff, and we see the true addiction in action. Addicts don't do this for enjoyment, instead they do it because they're miserable without it. For many, their first sexual experience ended in an orgasm, so they acquired the belief that they can't enjoy sex without one. For men, porn is marketed as an aid towards sex, sometimes even as an education in confidence during the act. This is nonsense. The conditioning of supernormal stimulus only succeeds in bringing it down. Facts. Not only is there nothing to give up, but massive positive gains to be had. When users contemplate quitting, they tend to concentrate on health and virility. These are valid and important reasons, but I personally believe the greatest gains are psychological. The return of your confidence and courage, freedom from slavery, no longer having awful black shadows at the back of your mind and despising yourself. Chapter 2, 7.2, Void, the beautiful void. Imagine having a cold sore on your face, so you go to the pharmacist and he gives you a free ointment to try. You put the ointment on and it disappears immediately. A week later it reappears, so you go back to the pharmacist and ask if they have any more ointment. The pharmacist says, sure, keep the tube, you might need it later. You apply the ointment and hey presto, the sore disappears once again. But every time the sore returns, it gets larger and more painful, with the interval getting shorter and shorter. Eventually, it's not the best view for you guys, is it? That was my most comfortable, so I'm a bit upset about that. Eventually the sore covers your whole face and is excruciatingly painful, and it's returning every half hour. You know the ointment will remove it temporarily, but you're very worried. Will the sore eventually spread over your whole body? Will the interval disappear completely? You go to your doctor and they can't cure it, so you try other things, but nothing helps apart from the ointment. By now, you're completely dependent on the ointment, never going out without ensuring that you have a tube with you. If you go abroad, you make sure you take several tubes with you. In addition to your worries about your health, the pharmacist is charging you $100 a tube. You have no choice but to pay up. You stumble across an article discussing this and find out it isn't just happening to you. Many people are suffering from the same problem. In fact, the medical community has discovered that the ointment doesn't actually cure the sore and instead only takes it beneath the surface of the skin. It's the ointment that causes the sore to grow. So all you have to do to get rid of the sore is to stop using the ointment and it will disappear in due course. Would you continue to use the ointment? Would it take willpower to not use the ointment? If you didn't believe the article, there might be a few days of apprehension. But once you realised the sore was beginning to get better, the need or desire to use the ointment would go. Would you be miserable? Of course you wouldn't. You had an awful problem, which you thought was incurable, but now you've found the solution. Even if it took a year for the sore to go away, each day as it improved, you'd think about how marvellous you felt. This is the magic of quitting porn. The sore isn't the body pains, lack of normal lust, flagging arousal, fading penetration, the wasted time spent on two-dimensional images, feelings of infringement or unentitlement, and despising the people who caught you, or even worse, despising yourself. These are all in addition to the sore. The sore makes us close our minds to all these things. It's that panic feeling of wanting a fix. Non-users don't suffer from that feeling. The worst thing we ever suffer is fear, the greatest gain being rid of that fear. It's caused by your first session, further strengthened and caused by each subsequent one. Some users are happy, blinded by their cunning little monsters, and so go through this same nightmare, putting up phony arguments to try and justify their stupidity. It's so nice to be free. Chapter 8. Okay. Saving time. Usually when users try stopping, the main reasons given are health, religion, and partner stigma. Part of the brainwashing of this awful drug is the sheer slavery of it. Man has fought hard to abolish slavery in many parts of the world, yet the user spends life suffering self-imposed slavery. They're oblivious to the fact when they're allowed to use porn, they wish they were a non-user. The only time that porn becomes precious is when we're trying to cut down or abstain, or when abstinence is forced upon us. It cannot be repeated often enough that brainwashing makes it difficult to stop porn, so the more we dispel before we start, the easier you'll find it to achieve your goal. Confirmed users who don't believe that porn has any negative effect on their health, porn-induced erectile dysfunction, hypofrontality, etc., and aren't having a mental tug-of-war, are typically younger or single with an occasional sex partner. Thus, the internal feedback is lost due to the nature of their youth and is too infrequent to be observed and registered. A better argument for a younger user is the time spent. Rather saying, "I can't believe you aren't worried about the time you're spending." Generally, their eyes light up, feeling disadvantaged if attacked on health grounds or social stigma. But on time, "Oh, I can afford it. It's only X hours per week, and I think it's worth it. It's my only vice of pleasure." I still can't believe you're not worried. Let's assume a half-hour daily average, which includes the physical drain of dopamine withdrawals. You're spending approximately a full working day every fortnight. I'm sure you'd agree that half an hour a day is a very conservative estimate. Have you thought about how much time you'll spend in your lifetime? What are you doing in that time? Developing real relationships? No. Your favourite porn star doesn't have sympathy for you. Just because you spend so much time on their videos, you're throwing time away. Not only that, you're actually using that time to ruin your physical health, destroying your nerves and confidence in order to suffer a lifetime of slavery, pain, melancholy, and peevishness. Surely that must worry you, right? It's apparent at this point, especially with young users, that they've never considered it a lifetime addiction. Occasionally, they work out the time they waste in a week, and that's alarming enough. Very occasionally, and only when they think of stopping, they'll estimate what they spend in a year, which is frightening, but over a lifetime is unthinkable. However, because we're in an argument, the confirmed user will impulsively say, "I can afford it, it's only so much a week," pulling an encyclopedia salesman routine on themselves. Would you refuse a job offer which pays your current annual salary and also gives you a month off every year? Any user would sign in a heartbeat and would get busy finding holiday deals to exotic locations. Figuring out how to spend a full month with no work would be the biggest problem to solve. In every discussion with a confirmed user, and please bear in mind that's not someone like you who plans to stop, nobody has ever taken me up on that offer. Why not? Often at this point, a confirmed user will say, "Look, I'm not really worried about the money aspect." If you're thinking along those lines, ask yourself why you aren't worried. Why in other aspects of your life will you go to great deals of trouble to save a few dollars here and there, but spend thousands killing your happiness and hanging the expense? Every other decision you make in your life will be the result of an analytical process of weighing up advantages and disadvantages to arrive at a rational decision. It may be the wrong decision, but it will be the result of a rational deduction. Whenever any user weighs up the pros and cons of using internet porn, the answer is a dozen times over, "Stop using, you're a mug." Therefore, all users are using not because they want to or decide to, but because they can't stop. They have to use porn, and so brainwash themselves, keeping their heads in the sand. Confirmed users should keep in mind that the situation will only get exponentially worse, with more studies coming out and more people talking about the ill effects of internet porn. Today, it's non-medical people discussing the effects. Tomorrow, it will be on your doctor's list of diagnostic tests. Gone are the days when the user can hide downtime behind work stress in their sex life. Your partner is going to ask why you're on your laptop at night. The porn user, already feeling wretched, now wants the ground to open up and swallow them. The strange thing is that though many people would pay good money for gym memberships and personal trainers to build muscles and look sculpted, and many of them in their imaginary and real desperation turn to treatments such as boosting testosterone with dubious and dangerous side effects. There are many people in this group who would benefit from stopping a practice systematically destroying their brain's natural relaxation systems. This is because they're still thinking with the brainwashed mind of the user. Wipe the sand out of your eyes for a moment. Internet porn is a chain reaction and a chain for life. And if you don't break that chain, you'll remain a user for the rest of your life. Estimate how much time you'll spend on porn for the remainder of your existence. Obviously, the amount of time will vary person to person, but let's assume it's 1.5 years of work hours. Imagine if there was a check from the lottery for 1.5 years of your salary lying on the carpet tomorrow. You'd be dancing with delight, so start dancing. You're about to start receiving those benefits. If you think this is a tricky way of seeing it, you're still kidding yourself. Work out how much time you would have saved if you'd never taken your first peek right at the start. Shortly, you'll be making the decision to use your final session. Not yet. Please remember the instructions. Remaining a non-user by not falling for the trap again. All you have to do to remain a non-user is not using porn and avoiding just one peek. Remember, if you do, it will cost you whatever you estimate your salary gain will be. If you're mentoring someone for their porn addiction, tell them they know someone who's refused a job offer that pays their current annual salary and also gives them a full month's worth of paid time off. When asked who that idiot is, tell them, you. It's rude, but sometimes you need to get to the point across in a less than polite way. Chapter 9. Health. This is the area where the brainwashing is the greatest with users, particularly the young and single, who think they're aware of the health benefits, of the health risks, but aren't. Many kid themselves by saying they're prepared to accept the consequences. If your internet router had a function that played an alarm tone with a warning when you hit a porn site saying, up until now you've gotten away with it, but if you stay another minute, your head will explode. Would you have stayed? If you're in doubt about the answer, try walking up to a cliff, standing on the edge with your eyes closed and imagining having the choice of either quitting porn or walking up blindfolded. There's no doubt what your choice would be, but by burying your head in the sand and hoping that you'll wake up one morning and not want to watch porn anymore, you accomplish nothing. Users cannot allow themselves to think of the health risks, because if they do, the addiction's illusory enjoyment goes. This explains why shock treatments are so ineffective in the first stages of quitting. It's only non-users who bring themselves to read about the destructive brain changes. Take this common conversation with users, generally younger ones. Why do you want to stop? Oh, I read in a pickup artist blog that it's good to stop for 4 days to amp myself up. Aren't you worried about the health risks? No, I could step under a bus tomorrow. But would you deliberately step under a bus? No, of course I wouldn't. Do you not bother to look left and right when you cross the road? Of course I do. Exactly. They go through a lot of trouble not to step under a bus, and the odds are already 1,000 to 1 against it happening. Yet the user risks the near certainty of being crippled by their addiction and appears to be completely oblivious. Such is the power of the brainwashing and addiction. Internet porn is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Isn't it strange that if we felt there was the slightest fault in an airplane, we wouldn't go up in it, even though the risks are millions to 1. Yet we take more than a 1 in 4 certainty with porn and are apparently oblivious to it. What does the user get out of this? Absolutely nothing. Another common myth is depression or peevishness. Many younger people aren't worried about their health because they don't suffer any of the depression or melancholy. The depression or stress isn't the disease, it's a symptom. Younger people in general don't feel the irritability or depression created due to their body's natural ability to produce more dopamine. As they age or their lives encounter serious setbacks, their already depleted resources are overworked and then they'll experience full-blown symptoms. When older users feel stressed, depressed or irritated, it's because nature's fail-safe mechanisms are protecting the nervous system from excessive dopamine flooding through trimming receptors. The user also develops other neurological changes that keep them in the rut. Think of it this way. If you had a nice car and allowed it to rust without doing anything about it, this would be pretty stupid. It would quickly become an immovable heap of rust, incapable of transporting you anywhere. However, it wouldn't be the end of the world as it's only a question of money. But your body is the vehicle that carries through your whole life. We all say that our health is our greatest asset. Ask any sick millionaire. Most of us can look back on an illness or accident in our lives where we prayed to get better. By being a porn user, you're not only letting the rust get in and doing nothing about it, you're systematically destroying the one vehicle you use to go through your entire life. Wise up. You don't have to do this. Remember, it's doing absolutely nothing for you. Just for a moment, take your head out of the sand and ask yourself that if you knew with certainty that your next session would start a process that would make you utterly unresponsive to someone you deeply love, would you continue using? Speaking to the people this happens to, they certainly didn't expect it would happen to them either, and the worst thing isn't the disease itself, but the knowledge that they brought it on themselves. Try to imagine how people who've hit the button feel. For them, the brainwashing is ended. They spend the remainder of their lives thinking, why did I kid myself for so long that I needed to masturbate to internet porn, to other people having sex? If only I had the chance to go back. Stop kidding yourself. You have that chance. It's a chain reaction. If you engage in the next porn session, it'll lead you to the next one and on to the next. It's already happening to you. Easy peasy, promises no shock treatment. So if you've already decided that you're going to stop, the following won't be shocking for you. If you haven't, skip the remainder of this chapter and come back to it once you've read the rest of the book. Volume upon volumes of research have already been written about the damage internet porn causes to our sex lives and mental well-being. The trouble is that until deciding to stop, they don't want to know. Forums and mentor groups are a waste of time because porn puts the blinders on. If inadvertently read, the first thing they do is open their favourite tube site. Porn users tend to think of the happiness, stress, and sex hazards as a hit and miss affair, like stepping on a landmine. Get it into your head, it's already happening. Every single time you open your porn site, you're triggering dopamine flooding and opioids getting to work. The normal water slides are greased and the ride takes you smoothly through the next steps, your brain having already given end to the script. The nervous system is now flooded by dopamine, and since it's the umpteenth time, dopamine receptors close up, and the little monster uses this slight dip in pleasure compared to the last time to drive you further down the red line to more shocking porn or behaviour in order to release more dopamine. More novelty, more dopamine, and the little monster tells you to keep going. So many pictures and videos in a single session triggers a supernormal stimulus, injecting more chemicals into the brain and driving you to continue. The entire time, your receptors are receiving information to shut down in response to the flooding. Orgasm only increases this effect and leads to withdrawal. You're in denial since the little monster craves for its fix with no real pain and discomfort. The threat of having erectile dysfunction terrifies many, but is why they block it from their mind and overshadow it with the fear of stopping. It's not that the fear is greater, but quitting today is immediate. Why look on the negative side? Perhaps it won't happen, having bounds have quit by then anyway. We tend to think of porn as a tug-of-war. On one side is fear, it's unhealthy, filthy, and enslaving. On the other side, the positives. It's my pleasure, my friend, my crutch. It never seems to occur to us this side is also fear. It's not that we enjoy porn, it's that we tend to be miserable without it. Heroin addicts, deprived of heroin, go through misery. But picture the joy when they're finally allowed to plunge a needle into their vein and end that terrible craving. Try to imagine how anyone could actually believe they get pleasure from sticking a hypodermic syringe into a vein. Non-heroin addicts don't suffer that panic feeling, and heroin doesn't relieve the feeling, it causes it. Non-users don't feel miserable if they aren't allowed to use porn. It's only users that suffer the feeling. Internet porn doesn't relieve the feeling, it causes it. The fear of the negative consequences doesn't help users quit because they liken the feeling to walking through a minefield. If you get away with it, fine, but if you were unlucky, you step on a mine and face the consequences. If you knew the risks and were prepared to take them, what did it have to do with anyone else? Addicts in this state typically develop the following evasive tactics. You'll eventually get old and lose your sexual prowess anyway. Of course you do. But sexual prowess isn't the point. We're talking about slavery here. Even if it was the case, is that logical reason for deliberately cutting yourself short? Quality of life is more important than just living. Precisely. Are you suggesting that the quality of life of an addict is greater than someone who isn't addicted? Do you really believe the quality of a user's life is better than a non-user's? A life spent covering their head in the sand and being miserable doesn't sound like a pleasant one. I'm single and not planning to settle down in the future, so why not? Even if that was true, is that a logical reason for playing with neurological impulse control mechanisms? Can you possibly conceive of anyone being stupid enough to strip naked whenever they're alone, regardless of how sure they aren't expecting anyone? That's what porn users effectively do. Progressive gunging up of our reward circuits with excessive stimulation and making them incapable of handling normal stresses of life doesn't help in enjoying your life with enthusiasm and vigour. Porn and masturbation has replaced the natural sexual appetite, like a chocolate bar replacing real food. Unsurprisingly, many doctors and psychologists are now relating various mental health problems to physiological causes. The mainstream medical community has laboured that porn has never been scientifically proven to be the direct cause of the issues reported by self-confessing individuals, but admitting one's sexual inability in public is such a shame-triggering event, so why would anyone do so unless they were really concerned, having found the cause and eliminated it from their lives? Easy peasy will help you rid yourself of porn and become a happy ex-user. No porn, porn-aided masturbation, or unnecessary orgasms. The only aid will be the touch, sight, and scent of your partner. Like whole grain bread after a well-developed appetite, you'll no longer want the high fructose corn syrup of internet porn. Evidence so overwhelming it needs no proof. When I bang my thumb with a hammer and it hurts, it need not be proven. The stress of internet porn has flow-on effects onto other aspects of the user's life, predisposing many to turn to drugs such as cigarettes and alcohol to cope, and in some instances even turning the host to consider suicide. Users also suffer illusions that the ill effects of porn are overstated. The reverse is the case. There's no doubt that internet porn is the major cause of sexual dysfunction and many other problems. How many divorces have been caused by porn? There are no reliable ways to know, but searches online communities suggest the number is growing exponentially. There's an episode of Friends where the guys who were receiving continuous free porn on TV started to wonder why the pizza delivery girl didn't ask to check out their big bedroom. When you're addicted, you invariably project porn fantasies on real women. Imagine what careless or even accidental porn exposure on the darker sides of the internet might do to someone already at a tipping point in their life. Fighting against these porn-induced thoughts will be a major drain on their mental health. Here's another thought experiment. Let's say someone comes to you and says they don't necessarily want an orgasm, but very much want to make love, even penetratively. They want to do it for as long and as far as you can go without an orgasm. But if it happens, then that's fine. I assure you of a phenomenal new sexual experience far better than any other. If you ever get that offer, try it. Effects of the brainwashing makes us tend to think like the man who, having fallen off a 100-story building, is quoted saying as he whizzes past the 50th floor, "So far, so good." We think that as we've gotten away with it so far, one more porn session won't make the difference. See it another way. The habit is a continuous chain for life, with each session creating the need for the rest, or the next. When you start the habit, you light a fuse. The trouble is, you don't know how long that fuse is, and every time you give into a porn session, you're one step closer to the bomb exploding. How would you know if it's the next one? Chapter 9.1, Sinister Black Shadows. Users find it very difficult to believe that internet porn actually causes those insecure feelings when you're out late at night after a contentious day at home or work. Non-users don't suffer from that feeling, it's porn that causes it. Another of the great joys of quitting porn is the freedom from the sinister black shadows at the back of our minds. All users know they're fools to close their minds from the ill effects of pornography. For most of our lives it's automatic, but the black shadows are always lurking in our subconscious minds, just below the surface. Several of the marvellous benefits of quitting are conscious, such as the ending of the waste of time and of the sheer stupidity of making love to a two-dimensional image. The last chapters have dealt with the considerable advantages of being a non-user, but in the interest of fairness, it's necessary to give a balanced account. Therefore, the next chapter lists the advantages of being a user. And chapter 10, advantages of being a porn user, is absolutely blank. Chapter 11, the willpower method. And that will do for now. Peace and love, baby.